I partially tore my MCL, and in a week and a half, I was back to competing. And this is what I did. I'm Seth. I'm a college wrestler at Utica University. And about 4 weeks ago, I partially tore my MCL during practice. The next day, I went to Winberg Physical Therapy, had Eric do an assessment, and we found that I have a grade 1 partial tear of my MCL, which was good news to me because it means that all I had to do was follow a good recovery plan and I could get back on the mat as soon as I could, and it wasn't a season or career-ending injury. So here's a few things that I did to help speed up my recovery and get me back on the mat as soon as I possibly could. All right, step 1 to my recovery is passive recovery. So before I would do any kind of wrestling, before I went on the mat, before I practiced, before I worked out, I would always heat my knee and make sure it was nice and warmed up. I also would do some stretching and some passive motion to make sure that the knee was feeling okay and that I was ready to compete. Some other things that I would also do, contrast therapy with heat and ice. I did some compression. I also did ultrasound and stim. We mixed in a few sessions of scraping and some cupping, and it was just kind of throwing everything to try to help speed up the recovery as fast as I possibly could so I could get back on the mat as soon as I could. So after those first few days, I started moving around on it, and I could do some things. I couldn't run necessarily. I couldn't wrestle to full ability, and so I decided to take that weekend off of a competition that we had. But I also started to do some active recovery. This included some single leg RDLs, some split squats, some balancing on the one leg, some more active stretching. Made sure I rode the bike a lot just to make sure that I didn't aggravate the knee more, but I still need to get my cardio in and get ready to compete. So was I back to wrestling pain-free in a week and a half? Definitely not. I was still managing my pain. I was still managing the limitations that I had in terms of mobility, and I still had to wear a brace, and I still do wear a brace as of right now, 4 weeks after, just to make sure that I'm not going to re-aggravate anything that's happening in the knee. So after that week and a half, I had a competition, and I still competed, and I was able to compete without major limitations, and I didn't have to think about. So that's one of the main things we want to think about when we come back to competition, is that are we limited mentally in our ability to wrestle, to run, or whatever we're doing? Is the injury actually limiting our confidence in our sport? And if it is, then we're not ready to come back to competition. Luckily for me, after that week and a half, I was able to, although still painful, it wasn't affecting my confidence in the knee, in the positions in wrestling. So I was able to compete. Although it was still painful and I was managing that pain, I was still able to compete. So now that I'm back to competing and the knee isn't really limiting me in my ability to wrestle, what am I still doing to help encourage recovery and prevent further injury? Before practice, I do heat. After practice, I do ice and compression. And I'm still doing extra workouts and extra rehab to make sure I'm building that strength back up. And that brings me to the question, how strong is my left leg to my right leg 4 weeks after this injury? And that's what we're gonna test today. With the easy force, the Y balance, and a few other things, I'm gonna actually, down to the numbers, be able to compare how close to 100% recovered my left leg is going to be compared to my right leg. So let's jump into that. All right, so we finished all our testing. We tested the strength of my quads, my hammy, and my single leg RDLs. We also did a Y balance test along with a split squat knee tuck on the ground contact time. So breaking down the strength, there is actually the biggest significance in strength difference between my left and right leg. That might also come from just years of overtraining, considering my right leg being my dominant leg versus my left leg on top of a left leg injury does probably play some sort of a factor in my strength difference. We probably see the biggest discrepancy, not just because of the injury. But for my hammy pull strength, it was a 68% difference between my left and my right. For the single leg RDL, it was an 83% difference between my left and the right. And for the quad extension, my left leg was 86% weaker than my right. Moving on to the Y balance test, for the anterior portion of the test, I had a 92.5% discrepancy between the left and the right. For the lateral side, we had a 101% discrepancy, which essentially means there's no difference.
Seth is demonstrating
so
the Y balance.
This is a medial, we had a 96.4% difference between left and right. We're shooting for anything above a 95% discrepancy. That is the standard. We would like to see anything above 99 as the gold standard, but we can work with 95%. Lastly, we had the split squat knee tuck, and for the ground contact time averages, it was a 96% difference between my left and my right leg. But we also want to look on that is the quality of the actual reps being performed. So for that, we took a slow-mo of me doing both my left leg and my right leg, and we can compare the actual quality of the reps to determine the recovery in that dimension as well.
And so this is the right leg. This is the baseline slow-mo footage. We're going to see hopefully a high knee drive and good consistent landing spots. And we're seeing that pretty good in this leg. And so we'll compare that with the left leg and see hopefully similar looking results. And when we look at the left leg, what we actually see is a little bit of decrease in the knee drive, as you can see, and the landing spots are a little bit more sporadic, which is okay because we already know based on the other testing that our recovery isn't 100% there, but it's on its way.
So this is my results 4 weeks after my injury, and as you can see, I'm not 100% recovered, but that's not necessarily stopping me from competing. The important thing is to know where you're at in your injury recovery process, and even though you're not 100%, you might still be able to compete in your sport depending on the injury. And it's also important to have good people that you're working with to help create a good plan and plan of action to move forward through your injury while you're slowly recovering, and once you even get to 100%, to increase and become even stronger and better in the sport and in the areas that you want to be improving in. Like me, I have Forte Strength and Fitness and Winberg Physical Therapy that helped me evaluate, create a plan of action, and move forward and help me get onto my way of recovery and get me back on the mat, and hopefully moving forward get me even stronger and better for the next season.